Interesting people, thought-provoking conversations, nutrition for your brain. Journey through the minds of the world's top performers and discover what it really takes to achieve your highest version. This is the Danny Miranda Podcast.
Hello, everybody, and welcome to the first edition of the Danny Miranda Podcast. I'm your host, Danny Miranda, and today we're going to dive into the mind of Tej Dosa. Tej is an entrepreneur, he's a copywriter, and he's someone I am blessed to be able to call a friend. In this episode, you're going to hear about Tej's entrepreneurial struggles. You're going to hear about his journey doing 75 hard, and he even threw in a story about the time that he got free tickets from UFC President Dana White. If you enjoyed this episode, let me know at Hey Danny Miranda on Twitter, or just send me an email, danny@dannymiranda.com. I really think you guys are going to enjoy this one, and without further ado, let's get to it. I just want to give people context for who you are, and there are people who might know me and might be discovering you from this call and vice versa. So why don't you tell everyone a little bit about who you are and what you got and where you came from and how you got to be at this place in the world. Tej Dosa, take it away, brother.
There we go. What an intro for the first podcast. I love it, bro. So like the quick and dirty, where I am right now is I'm an entrepreneur, online entrepreneur. Been in the online space since I was 14 years old. I'm currently 26. The way I got into this space was quite interesting because I got exposed to self-help when I was still relatively young, around like 12, 13, maybe around then. I picked up my first book. I think it was Rich Dad, Poor Dad or some stuff like that. And just from reading a bunch of self-help, I always knew that my number one goal in life is just to like always live life on my own terms. And like back then, I kind of coined a phrase where it was like top of the world or bottom of the ocean, like mediocrity isn't an option. And obviously as like a young kid, you have no insights about like responsibilities or obligations. So it's like obviously a lot easier to say as a kid than as like a 45-year-old man with like a family. But like I was like, when I came up with that phrase, and like I always wanted to honor it. But around high school, like early high school, we're all unreal, bro. We got to keep that shit in there.
This is it. It's going in.
But yeah, what happened with me was I used to always start a bunch of businesses since I was super young. A lot of those businesses failed. Some had minor successes where I just made like a couple $100, whatever. But around like high school, the transition point for me was like one summer. I thought it was going to be a typical summer where we were just going to chill with the boys, play road hockey, all that stuff. But what actually ended up happening was my parents were like, yo, you got to go to the blueberry farm to go start picking blueberries. It was like pretty popular amongst my grandparents and like the elders. They would just go to the farm in the summers and like pick a bunch of blueberries. And then my parents sent me with my grandparents to the farm for that entire summer. And it was fucking brutal because every day I was like picking berries for like 14 hours a day in the sun. And like at the end of the day, I was only making like $50. So it was like straight bullshit. And I remember one day at the farm, I was picking blueberries and then there was this guy at the farm and he was like lying down and just like relaxing. And I was like to my grandma, I pointed at him. I'm like, yo, who is that guy? And why isn't he working? That guy's not going to make any money today. And then she's like, oh, he's the owner of the farm. And I'm like, God damn it. I'm like, the type of leverage that I need. So like the rest of the farm, the rest of my blueberry picking days, I would just like take a bunch of audiobooks and just listen to those while I was like picking blueberries. And I was like shitty as fuck. Like my fingers were barely working. Like my grandparents, like you should see them, bro. Like they're a fucking machine. But like me, like I was like, so like, I don't know what the fuck I was doing. Like just $50 a day. And then anyways, what happened with that was like, that summer ended. I went back to high school, whatever, lived as a typical high school student. The next summer, my parents started to hit me with the same bullshit, like, yo, are you going back to the farm? And I was like, no, man, like, let me try to figure it out on my own. If I can make the equivalent of what I'm making in a day on the farm through my own means, then is it cool if I don't have to go? And my mom was like super supportive. She's like, yeah, if you can do that, go for it. So like, I literally hopped on Google and I was like, how to make money online. What I discovered back then, like drop shipping, e-commerce, marketing agencies, none of that shit was popular back then. Back then, like if you search for something like that, all you would find was like survey sites and like clicking on random ads and like watching the ads for 30 seconds and like getting paid like $1. I remember I signed up for NeoBucks that same day and I made like $2. And like I was like above the moon because I was like, holy shit, like you can actually make money. And I remember using that $2 to buy like a slice of pizza, and it was like amazing. Like that was the best pizza I ever had, even though the pizza was trash as fuck. Just the fact that I made it from online business, just that $2, and just seeing like how I could take money out of the laptop and use it in the real world to like buy pizza or whatever it was as like a 12-year-old, 13-year-old, that really changed something inside my head. And like from there, I was like, yo, this is amazing. Like I can do anything. This works 24/7. And like from there, I just went basically balls deep into online business. But before I went balls deep into online business, I also had to like, I worked at McDonald's for like 3 days. And like literally every single day I burnt my hands because I sucked at fucking flipping the burgers and making the fries. And like I remember working at McDonald's for those 3 days, and like just even at McDonald's, like the culture and like the politics, like all that stuff, like I used to never be down with it. And even at McDonald's, it was like so like stressful. And I was like, yo, if this is how it is at a McDonald's, imagine how it's gonna be like in the corporate world. So literally on my 3rd day at McDonald's, the same day they gave me my uniform, I returned it, and I was like so embarrassed at the time to tell them that I'm quitting. So I like made up some bullshit. I was like, yo, I got a job at Best Buy, so I gotta like bounce from here. Like that's what I told them. I was so embarrassed. But like after I left, I walked out of McDonald's and like I went straight to Chevron gas station, got like a big ass Slurpee, sat on the bus stop and literally like laughed for like 25 minutes because I knew at that moment that I was never gonna work for somebody else ever again. And like what's funny is I didn't even tell my parents I quit McDonald's. So like literally I would tell them I'm going to McDonald's, but I would just go to the library and try to make online business work. And like I had that motivation that I needed to make my McDonald's salary back, right? So like to show my parents that I'm still making money. So like from there I like tried doing a bunch of different things, and I would make money like here and there, but it wasn't like big money. It was like a couple $100 every now and then, with like blogging, Google AdSense, just like trying to sell random shit on Craigslist, a bunch of different things. Also tried like starting up a bunch of record labels, clothing companies, social media apps, all this stuff. And I had mediocre success, but it was nothing to write home about. And then like high school was ending and I was like getting into university, and I kind of had this realization one day that the reason I kept failing was because like growing up, I was a super shy, insecure, introverted kid. And I realized like I kept shying away from sales and marketing. Like I was that typical person who just wanted to focus on the product, who just wanted to be in the corner and like not really have to market anything. And like after I realized that, I kind of like thought to myself that, hey, like if I want to make this work, I have to like get over my fears, get over my insecurities, and really master sales and marketing. So around that time, I discovered direct response marketing, and I went ham with direct response, and I started applying it to the businesses I was running at the time, which were primarily info product businesses. And those started taking off. From there, I started having people that I knew in my network that I just made friends with online start reaching out, asking if I could do the same for them. That eventually led to a marketing agency. That agency eventually led to a bunch of different businesses and a bunch of different industries. And yeah, basically I went to university while still running those businesses, ended up making enough money where I didn't have to get a job upon graduation, right? So like the last job I ever worked was at McDonald's. And like since that time, I've just been making money online. The current business models that I'm in are basically the typical 3 tried and true models. Marketing agency, which is like the main one, info products as well as physical products. So those are the three main business models. And yeah, that's like the quick and dirty. Like I said, I'm 26 now, started at 14. And I think it really started from that blueberry picking story, because without that, I wouldn't have had the motivation or the discomfort to actually want to change, because like life was pretty good. Like I didn't really grow up too hard. Life was pretty comfortable. My parents, even though they came to Canada as like refugees and we were like on welfare, but I didn't even notice. I didn't even know that we were on welfare growing up. My mom actually told me like 3 years ago, and I was like, Mom, what the fuck? Like, why didn't you tell me this before? This is marketing gold, you know? But yeah, that's like the quick story.
Yeah, man. It's so crazy because someone will find you on Twitter, you personally, and they'll say, wow, like this dude, it seems like he's got it all figured out. And what they often don't see is all that, all what you just described, the quick and dirty in a matter of, 12 years, 13 years you're talking about, where now what you're presenting to the world is X, but what you were actually going through was so much other things. And so I think that it's so easy to forget that. It's so easy to see that the picture we're presenting at a certain point is only something that we've worked towards. And I think that gets lost on a lot of people, and certainly gets lost on me when I'm looking up to people like LeBron James or people like Tim Ferriss. You're seeing these people and you're seeing them after X amount of years of work. And to hear that story is awesome, because it's inspiring, man. It really is. And I appreciate you sharing it.
Yeah, dude, that's so true, because even like one thing I didn't mention in the story was like where I really learned direct response was like from like a apprenticeship that I did with like a really successful marketer for like 4.5 years. And I remember like during the first week, one of the first things he showed me was like a piece of copy that he had written like when he first started, right? Because I was just used to seeing his copy and his like direct response material like at that later stage, and I was like, whoa, this is like so amazing, like I'll never be this good. And then he's like, yo, check this out, and he showed me an example of copy that he wrote from the early days, and it was like fucking trash, right? And I was like, whoa, like, if you could go from there to like where you are now, like that really gave me hope. So like even with myself, like I fail at times, but I always try to be as real as I can, and like try to give people the real in terms of like, where I started from and where I am currently, and how like, dude, I was like trash in the beginning. I was trash with everything. Like nothing was working, right? I really think it's important to highlight those early days, because it gives a lot of kids, especially, a lot of hope.
And I think you did that so well when you put out your first direct response ad that you've ever done, the red convertible. I think it was something like that. When I looked at it, I was like, oh my God, just to see your copy today and see how far it came is incredible. And it gets lost. It gets lost throughout the whole process. And when you don't have that understanding that you're going to suck in the beginning, like this podcast is going to suck. And that's completely okay, because it gives you something to build on. And the 100th will be 10 times better, and the 1,000th will be 10 times better than that. It's like everything is a growing process. And when you put that out there and you tell people like, look, I've been through failure. Look, this is my failure. It helps people understand that there's more to life than just appearing as a success at a certain point.
Exactly. And like now I kind of like reframe that in my mind, like exactly what you just said. Now, like the areas that I suck at, I'm like so fucking grateful, because like what I feel like what life is all about is like you start from point A, and like say you end up in like point Z, if all goes well. Like what life is really about is like all the distance you put in between where you start and where you end up, right? So like somebody could start in poverty, another person could start with like 5 million in the bank, whatever. Like it doesn't really matter. Everybody's point A and point Z is going to be different, but what matters is the distance you put in between. Right. So like the more you suck at something, I'm like, yo, this is amazing, because like I could actually grow. And like that's what gives life so much joy, so much meaning, so much sense of accomplishment. Imagine if you were good at everything from day one. Life would be boring as fuck.
I totally agree. But were you always like that is my question.
Yeah, kind of. Like I remember when so like in high school, right? Like I had a circle of friends. and we were all really entrepreneurial. And I remember like my teachers used to like shit on our entrepreneurial dreams like 24/7. Like the counselors have told me like the most dumbest shit I could possibly even imagine telling a kid.
That's
I was like,
crazy.
yeah, like I was so like fucked up. Like I would take all their messages, all that doubt, and like put it in a Word doc, and I would read it every single day because I wanted to prove them wrong, right?
Wow.
That kind of gave me a lot of motivation. But I remember my counselors telling me, my friends telling me, even my own family, to be 100% honest with you, telling me like the chances of actually succeeding in business are so slim, telling me constantly that I'm just throwing my life away. And I remember at that time, I was like, the reason I want to do this is because it's hard, and nobody else will want to do this because it's hard. But if I can win at this, then I kind of set up a huge barrier to entry, and I'll be able to experience a level of success and life that is unknown to most people. That's the entire reason I want to do it, because it's so hard, right? And I remember saying that to my friends and saying that to my family and saying that to my teachers and counselors and all this stuff, and they were just looking at me like I was crazy. And that's like where the saying top of the world, the bottom of the ocean comes from, because like truthfully, I lived at the bottom of the ocean and I didn't think I was going to reach the top of the world, but like I didn't care because I was just living life on my own terms.
Brother, that's amazing. And what sticks out to me is the fact that you mentioned doing hard things and making that realization at, I don't know how old you were in high school, but to make that realization that doing something hard was actually going to be a positive thing is something that took me 24 years to figure out, and something that you helped me figure out while I was doing 75 Hard. We did 75 Hard together. For a brief backstory, it's a program where you have to do 5 things every day. You have to take a progress picture. You have to do 2 workouts, one of them being outside. You have to follow a diet, read 10 pages. And what's the last thing you have to do?
The progress pic. Did you get that?
And drink a gallon of water. That's right.
Water.
Yeah. So I did this program starting on September, I believe, 18th, 2019. And to give everyone a brief backstory, I texted Tej, hey, I'm doing this program. And he said, okay, I'm down. And he started doing it with me, and we texted each other at the end of each day that we had completed our tasks. So when I did this program, I realized for the first time that, holy shit, if I do something hard and I'm proud of it, this is actually a good thing, and this is actually going to make me feel proud of myself and help me. And it's incredible that you realize this at such a young age. And going back to 75 Hard, please tell me, Tej, please tell me what the lessons that you learned.
Dude, 75 Hard, that was like, man, honestly, like out of all the self-development work that I've done, just doing that program with you was like unreal. Like the benefits were amazing. And it's funny, like I can like kind of sit here and say like, yo, I learned that like when I was in high school. But like, honestly, I only learned that in like business, right? Like all my other areas of life, like I still wanted to take the easy road. So I was still a pussy in like all those other areas. But like in business, like I was just like, yo, like fuck, I just want to go for it. But yeah, like with 75 Hard, I learned a fuck ton of lessons. I remember we hopped on a call, our catch-up call, and we were like going through our journal entries with all our insights. And like from that list, some of the things that come to mind was the number one thing, or like one of the main benefits for me, was just discovering the power of living intentionally and living in alignment with the strongest version of yourself, right? Like so many times, like before, like I'll be completely frank, that I just prioritized, like for a large chunk of my life, I just prioritized business, and like I put business before my own well-being at times, right? Like I was that fucking maniac that was just going ham 24/7 from the time I woke up to the time I slept, and I would just be sitting on the laptop for like 12, 14 hours straight. Like back then it was like horrible. And like with 75 Hard, what it really taught me was the value of putting yourself first above all, above clients, above customers, above your mom, above your dad, above your siblings, above your girlfriend, above your friends, everybody. Because ironically, it's like when you put yourself first and you do what you need to do, that gives you the fuel to like supply everybody else. And I remember when we hopped on that catch-up call, like you were talking about, like the difference it made in everybody around you, just seeing you go through 75 hard. It's like you become a light switch, and like as you go around other people, you start lighting them up as well, which is so powerful. And some of the other lessons that I learned was, another big one was accountability. I think that was fucking huge for me because like prior to 75 hard, I had never used accountability partners, and just like using you as the accountability partner and vice versa, it was a huge help because like it's easy for me to let myself down, but it's hard for me to let you down, right? Especially like if like in my head, I was going to be like, yo, if I don't do this program, Danny's going to be like, yo, this guy tweets all this fucking shit on Twitter, but he can't 75 hard. Literally, like every fucking day, like I would have that thought, and I was like, yo, I can't let Danny down. And like some days were like hard as fuck, where I had like a long work day. And I remember I would text you those days. It would be like 11 p.m. at night and had to get that second workout in, or it was like midnight and like I realized I didn't drink enough water, so literally just like pounding water like shots, right? Like it was a bunch of rough days as well, but like that accountability was huge. What about you?
Bro, those two are totally things that I have thought about so many times. And just touching on that accountability real quick, I think that the person that you are accountable to has to be someone, it doesn't have to be, but it certainly helps if someone is on the same wavelength as you, right? Because if you try to use your mom, let's say, as an accountability coach or accountability partner, and she doesn't believe in you, she doesn't want you to do what you want to do, that's going to be really hard because now you have to overcome her, and she's going to start thinking, oh, like he doesn't really want to do X, and then you have to kind of combat that. So I think the fact that we were both just on the same page, had the same goals, we both respected each other mutually, I think that played a big role in the accountability. I think it's very important to choose the right person, because accountability was something that I hadn't thought about as so important. But after doing this, I can't imagine not using accountability to achieve what I want to achieve.
Exactly. Dude, that's so powerful. That kind of reminds me of like, you know how like most of society, they're taught like, don't give a fuck what anybody thinks. I think it's really valuable to find an accountability partner whose opinion you really care about, right? Who you really respect. And then it's like, yo, I really care what Danny thinks about me when it comes to 75 hard. So like, I'm going to live up to those standards.
100%. 100%. So I want to touch on, bro, you had one crazy story that totally blew my mind. And I remember exactly where I was when I read it. It was an email of yours where you talked about, this is kind of going in a different direction, but I have to bring this up, is Dana White and the UFC and your experience with them and the business lessons and the life lessons you gained. I would be going crazy if I couldn't touch on this in this podcast, because I think about this story probably like once a day, once a week, where take it away and explain the story and please give us the lessons that you learned from the story.
Dude, I'm thrilled that you asked about this story, because I never get tired of telling this story. I got the biggest fucking smile on my face. It's just one of those stories that were just like cemented a lot of lessons for me. But yeah, so when I was in grade 11 or grade 12, I think it was the first or second time that the UFC was in town in Vancouver, and a bunch of my friends, we were huge UFC fans. We used to watch all the fights. Chuck Liddell was my guy back in the day. I used to also watch like a bunch of Tito Ortiz, Shamrock fights. Like those were epic. So I started watching UFC very early. And when they announced that the UFC was coming to Vancouver, we were like hyped. And at that time, Dana White used to do a lot of video blogs and on YouTube. And he used to also tweet out his location on Twitter at random times in whatever city he was in, and just handing out free tickets because like I mentioned, UFC was still kind of like on the come up at the time. And I remember it was a bunch of us, probably like 20 friends. We created this plan where the UFC was going to be hosting the weigh-ins the day before the fight at Canada Place in Vancouver. And we were just going to go to the weigh-ins, and our plan was to set the intention of finding Dana White and just asking him for tickets, right? So like we had planned this about a week before the big day. And like another point to point out as well is this was around the times of like final exams. It was provincial exams, right? So like those exams here in Canada kind of are responsible for determining your grades and like what universities you get into, because a lot of the universities look at those grades, right? So it was around that time span. A lot of tension was in the air. And I remember coming up with that plan. And this plan, unfortunately or fortunately, required us to skip school to actually attend the weigh-ins because they were happening earlier in the day. And I remember throughout that week, there was a huge buzz in high school. And somehow one of the teachers who was actually going to be giving us the provincial exam for the day that we wanted to skip found out about our plan. I remember she called us into her room and she's like, yo, I know exactly what you guys are trying to do. You guys can't skip. This exam is worth so much. It has so much significance on your future. If you guys skip, here are the consequences. I forgot what the consequences were, but she like riled off a huge list. And I remember after that conversation and leaving her room, there was like 20 of us in the room and like literally 16 people left the room like, fuck, now what? And like 4 of us left the room with like the biggest smile on our face because we're like, fuck that. I don't know what the fuck she's talking about. We're going to figure out a way and we're still going to go. And like, so from that list of 20 people, there was only 4 of us left. And then we kickstarted the plan. It was on a Friday, the weigh-ins, woke up super early, grabbed my backpack like I was going to school, but like completely went the other way, took a bus, hopped on the SkyTrain, ended up in downtown in time for the weigh-ins. And then we started watching the weigh-ins. They were cool. Dana White doesn't actually show up to the weigh-ins. And then we're checking his Twitter. He's not posting anything. We're like, fuck, is this guy even going to come? And then there was a hotel beside the weigh-in venue. And then we were like, it was getting blocked off by a bunch of security. And we were like, yo, like, if he's going to be here, they're probably going to hit up that hotel after the weigh-ins. So let's try to sneak into the hotel. And I remember it was like a fuck ton of security all around the venue. And we couldn't get in through any of the doors. Like, we tried walking up. Like, we were like 16, 17 years old, right? So, like, first we were like coming up with a plan of like trying to fake that we had media passes. But like, obviously that wasn't going to work. And then we found an entrance actually through the parking lot. So we ended up inside the hotel, and then the hotel was huge. We literally looked inside the hotel for like 2 to 3 hours, just walking around, dodging security, trying to act like we belong. And I remember like towards the end of that tour of the hotel of trying to find Dana White, we were defeated. We were like, fuck, man, we skipped out on provincial exams. We got a fuck ton of consequences waiting for us. And to make matters worse, we didn't even get to see Dana White. We didn't even get to meet him. And we didn't even get the tickets. And then we're like, fuck. And then one of my buddies is like, yo, like, don't think about that. Let's just go get some fresh air outside. So we literally walked to the nearest exit, which is like still inside the hotel, but it's just like a balcony. And then we open the doors and we're getting some fresh air. And literally once we're done getting some fresh air and we turn around, we see 2 people walking towards us. And one is Dana White and the other is a security guard. If you like watch the Dana White video blogs, you'll know who the security guard is. And like, he was just approaching us and we're like, holy fuck, is this for real? And one of my buddies is like, yo, we fucking cut class. We did X, Y, Z to get these fucking tickets. Can you hook us up? And like, I just remember Dana looking at us, looking at his buddy who was the security guard and just like laughing and like looking at his buddy. And he's like, yo, give these boys some fucking tickets. And and like his fucking buddy rolled up like he had like a wad of like fucking tickets inside his pockets, and like he handed us 4 tickets, prime seats right beside the media, and we got like autographs, whatever, photos taken, and then we hit up the UFC the next night, which was amazing. And then we also ran into Dana White and got to meet the fighters after as well, which was surreal. And I remember fucking showing up to class on Monday morning, like just brimming with confidence. And at this time, obviously, like all those friends that didn't get to go, who pussied out basically, were like, you know, like so regretful that they missed out. And I remember coming back to school Honestly, like I think we did get a little bit of consequences, but like we were just riding so high that it didn't even matter. And like the teachers just figured out a new way, like another day for us to take the test. And like through that story, I learned a bunch of lessons. One was just the power of setting intention, right? Like who in their right mind would be like, yo, I'm going to set the intention to like meet Dana White and get free tickets in Vancouver. And it was like packed, right? It was like a packed venue. There was like a fucking shit ton of people there. It seems like very unlikely that that's going to happen, but like that story really solidified the power of intention for me and just like shaping reality according to your will. The second lesson that it taught me was just like the importance of having some balls on you. Like so many times in life, when you set an intention and you want to go for something, life kind of tests you with a bunch of obstacles. And this story, it was like our teachers trying to like scare us and try to tell us that like, yo, you can't do it. You're going to get these so many consequences. We're going to call your parents. You're going to get 90-minute detentions, blah, blah, blah. That was like the universe testing us in a way. And like our 16 friends who like every time we see them still, we still bust their balls for being such pussies on that day. And like, yeah, like that really solidified the fact that you really need balls. Like when you set the intention, universe is going to test you, and then you just have to have the balls to overcome it. The third lesson was more so just a marketing lesson in terms of the UFC. Like at the time, like, you know, I was like super naive and stuff. I was like, yo, Dana's just like such a great guy, which he is. But I was like, he's such a great guy. He's just fucking throwing out random tickets to whoever, giving you prime seats. This is amazing. This guy's like, you know, this guy's a saint. And then I remember like after I discovered marketing and stuff, and I was like, yo, Dana, those free tickets were really just like the lead magnet to the UFC, because after we went to that first event, it was like the most amazing event I have ever gone to. And it wasn't even because the fights were so good. It was just the atmosphere, the vibe, the energy in the air. Like I've been to a bunch of sporting events before, but like nothing compared to the UFC. And like just from after that initial experience and getting a taste of the UFC for free, ever since then, like the UFCs, every time I came back to Vancouver, like me and my buddies, we always grabbed tickets and we always been there. So like that was like one of the third lessons that I learned, was just the power of like, if you got a really good product, like sometimes you just gotta sprinkle a little bit of Coke in front of your target audience and get them hooked. And then after, you can sell them for life.
Dude, what a story. What a story. I remember where I was when I read that email, and I was just like, how is this possible? How could, and it's one of those things where like, if you didn't know it to be true, if you didn't, you wouldn't believe it. You wouldn't believe this story. And I'm so grateful that you took the time to write that up and explain it, because I think so often, I think especially about when people are tested and what you overcame, and especially as a 16-year-old, you're tested by the authority figure of teachers and family, and what could happen if we don't do what they say to do. And you ended up seeing that the consequences were nothing and the rewards were incredible. And just to think about how this could be applied in life in general, where so many of the consequences, the quote unquote consequences, are actually, there's no penalty. And if you actually have the balls to say, yes, I will go for it, incredible things have the power to happen.
100%. And that's so powerful. Like the lesson that I took away from there has been like basically like that model of just setting intentions and having the balls to like ignore the consequences and just bet on yourself has been instrumental. Even like in university, like there's so many things that you can just do without giving a fuck about the consequences that lead to such epic experiences, epic stories, right? Whether it's like starting a business when everybody expects you to fail and you end up growing it to a success, whether it's like approaching an attractive girl you see in class, right? Like a lot of people would let the consequences get in the way, but if you're just like, fuck it, like I'm just gonna have the balls to do it, like that leads to such amazing stories, amazing adventures. Basically anything, I feel like, that people wanna improve in or just like make life more exciting, right? Because like what the fuck are we even doing here? Like, you know, like who the fuck are authorities? Who the fuck are these teachers to tell you you can't do this, you can't do that? Who the fuck even invented all these consequences? Like those people are just like us. They're just people. So like, You know, like stop letting so many other people set consequences for your own life. Just set your own intentions and have the balls to live up to those intentions, regardless of what anybody said. And like, it hurts at times. Like there's so many times, bro, where like my own parents were setting consequences for me, right? Like my own siblings were setting consequences. And like, I even had to go against them in the short term, but what is ironic and kind of funny is like in the long term, in order to make your parents proud, you sometimes have to disappoint them in the short run.
Yes. Did you tweet that? Because I remember thinking and
that's
hearing that.
Good memory. That is a tweet.
Yeah, man. And you know what's crazy is that I think the internet allows people to have the freedom that they've never had before. In terms of, if you wanted to put your thoughts out there 50 years ago, what would you have to do? You'd have to find a book publisher. You need to get some radio deal, or you need to do something. Someone would have to say, yes, you can do this. And now I'm starting this podcast, put out a blog. You can do whatever you want. You can put a voice out there. You can interview. You can talk to so many people. And the internet allows you to do that, and which gives you the freedom to basically say, screw the authorities. I can be the authority. And that's an incredible power. And so I want to talk about your blog that you started in high school, because I also started a blog in high school, but I was so fascinated by like that you started writing online and that you were made fun of for it, but you didn't care. You just said, you know what, screw it. I guess I started a diary now. So talk to me about starting your blog and what that did for your entrepreneurial journey.
Yeah. So like, I've been like I said from the intro story, I was like super entrepreneurial since like a super young age, and like I always wanted to like make money on my own terms and just live life on my own terms. And like, so while I was building up like a bunch of those businesses and like eating a lot of shit, I started documenting my journey with a blog. The blog was called "What's the Point of Living Average," which I literally got from a Jay-Z video. He was doing an interview with somebody, and then he just like said it. He's like, yo, what's the point of living average? And that just stuck with me. I was like, yo, this guy gets it. So let me just call my blog that. And like, that's the title that I rolled with. And I remember in the beginning, like once I started blogging, I was actually really embarrassed. So I actually didn't blog under my name in the beginning. I had like a pen name, and like I was like reading a bunch of marketing books at the time, and they told me like, you know, like names with alliteration really do well. So like the pen name that I had was like Adrian Adrello, which like, you know, like I just fucking thought of it randomly. I'm like, fuck it, let's go with that. So like I started under that pen name. But after like three weeks, or like, yeah, around that time span, I was like, yo, fuck it. Like, I'm just going to own it. I'm just going to, you know, write behind my name, because like with the pen name, it's cool and all, but I feel like the type of content that I was writing was like really raw and real. Like I was totally discussing like all the highs and lows that I was facing on this entrepreneurial journey. And like, I feel like just writing under a pen name wasn't giving it that raw and realness. So like I shifted towards my name. And like, I remember, I don't know how, but like some people in high school obviously found out. And like, you know, they used to like fucking make their little shitty jokes like, yo, like, you know, why the fuck are you blogging? Why don't you start a diary? And I was like, fuck, like I have a diary. Like, so what? And then I just kept blogging and kept blogging. And what's really cool about that blog was initially, like I thought like maybe I'll be able to make some money with it, which I actually did end up making some money with it. But the real power of the blog was it led to so many opportunities that I wouldn't have previously imagined, right? So like before, when I started blogging, I knew nothing about like copywriting, direct response, none of that stuff, or like storytelling. But like every single day I would just write a blog post, and I kept that up for like 3 years. And like these blog posts were like 750 to like 2,000 words each, right? So like by the time I was done, the blog had like, I think over 1,000 posts. Now, granted, those posts in the early days were like absolutely shitty. Like if I was to see an old post, like I would just cringe. Like everything was so bad. I didn't even know the difference between like then and then, right? Like just a bunch of fucking bullshit. And then, yeah, like that blog led to so many cool stories. Like I got one of my first copy clients through that blog, who paid $5,000 a month when I was like relatively new to the game. that led to like meeting a bunch of people. Whenever I would travel, I had like a small email list. I would just be like, yo, I'm going to be here. If you guys are in town and you want to like crack open a brew, even though I was under the drinking age in the US, I was like, well, if I can figure it out. And like that led to like so many relationships, which led to like so many deals, so many developments, so much more learning. And yeah, like that's like the gist of the blog. I feel like even that blog, like with a lot of people just like shit talking you. I feel like once you do something that's like out of the ordinary, it's going to get a lot of flack. But one thing I realized was, especially like later in life, when I started going down the spiritual rabbit hole, is like whatever somebody says about you, they just feel about themselves. So like once I realized that, I was just like, you know, like I don't take anything personally. Even like now, like I had crazy experiences with like spirituality and like meditation, and like the way I perceive myself now is just like a video game character. Like anything that really happens to this character, anything somebody says to this character, any success or failure that occurs to this character, honestly doesn't even like fucking register that much. It's like, oh shit, like my character experienced this, whatever. And like it's an amazing way to live, because I feel like I can actually control the character without being bombarded by all the bullshit that slows a lot of people down. And like that allows you to live life on such an epic scale, because literally nothing can slow you down anymore.
Okay, so you mentioned the spirituality. So let's go down that rabbit hole. Explain to me how you got started in spirituality and thinking about meditation. And obviously you can't go into all your experiences, but tell us how it started for you.
Yeah, so it started, everything for me really started with business. Like my one and only goal was just to like succeed in business. So like I would read a bunch of autobiographies. I would read a bunch of books from entrepreneurs. And my thinking at the time, and still my thinking to this day, is the exact same. If somebody is like more successful than me, if somebody is like doing what I want to do, and they're doing something that is like out of the ordinary, or even if they're just doing anything in general, I'm just going to mimic them. I'm just going to copy them. So I remember in late high school, early college, I was reading like a bunch of blogs, and I was reading a bunch of books, listening to just interviews with successful people, and they would mention meditation. And I would be like, you know, like I was like typical type A person, where I was like, yo, I'm trying to like make $1 million. Like, I'm not going to fucking sit in a corner for 20 minutes, right? Like time is money. What's this guy talking about, right?
I know exactly what you're talking about.
I was like, yo, this guy's lost it. He may be rich, but like, I don't know, something's wrong with his brain, right? So I like resisted it for a while, but it was just one of those things that just kept coming up. It just kept coming up. And I was like, all right, man, I'm gonna give it a shot. And the lens, or like that frame in which I first got exposed to meditation, was like, I was just using it as a way to enhance my creativity, right? So like at that time, like I had to like come up with a lot of marketing angles, a bunch of copy ideas, business ideas, things like that. And I noticed that when I would meditate, I would start getting a lot more insights and a lot more clarity, right? So like I started meditating in 2011, and like I think for like the first 5 years, for the first 5-6 years, I just stuck to like 20 minutes a day, because like I was only using meditation as a way to become a better entrepreneur. And it was really effective, right? It like I kept my focus high. It kept my stress levels down. It kind of gave me a sense of detachment as well. Like when I would have so many fires to put out, it wasn't like I got absorbed by the fire. I could remain conscious and like consciously take out the fire without letting the fire interfere with my state of mind, which was huge. And it's huge for any entrepreneur, especially as you get bigger and bigger and start making more money and have more people like hitting you up and more opportunities, right? You really need a way to like develop that healthy sense of detachment. So like meditation used to be huge for me. And I did it for mostly just creative reasons. But then I remember after Steve Jobs passed away, I picked up his autobiography one day, and I was reading it. And they mentioned inside the book that there was only one book that this guy read every year that he had on his iPad, the only book. It was also the only book that he gave away at his funeral to everybody who attended, with a note that said, self-actualize yourself. And I remember the CEO at the time of Salesforce talking about it, and the effect that not only did that book have on his entrepreneurial life, but also just going down the rabbit hole of spirituality. And the book was Autobiography of a Yogi. And like I remember reading that inside the Steve Jobs book, and I was like, yo, what the fuck is this tech guy reading books about yogis for, right? Like, where's the correlation in that? It made no sense to me. But what really interested me was inside Steve Jobs' book, they talked a lot, and I mean a lot, about his reality distortion field. And like basically what that was like anybody who worked with Steve Jobs or anybody who came into contact with him said that he had like an uncanny ability to just bend reality to his will. Like he would set like impossible deadlines for the staff of Apple, and somehow these guys would pull it off. And like after the deadline, like if you were to ask the employees how did they do it, they were like, yo, I have no idea. Like that was impossible. It's just something about Steve. Like this guy can just bend reality to his will. And I remember Bill Gates calling Steve Jobs a wizard, like in terms of how he can just bend reality. And like for one thing that I realized was like, if I admire somebody and I look up to somebody, like for Steve Jobs, I looked up to him in terms of business. I want to learn from the things that influenced him, right? So instead of just learning from him directly, just by reading the book, I want to learn what influenced Steve and what allowed him to come up with things like his reality distortion field. So I kind of put two and two together. I was like, yo, if Autobiography of a Yogi is the only book on this guy's iPad, maybe the clues are in there. And also in Steve Jobs' book, he talks a lot about how he went to India when he was in his younger years, how he was meditating, how he was studying Buddhism, a bunch of things. And then that initial book sent me down the rabbit hole. And I read that book and I was like, holy fuck, like that book is a trip in itself. And like after reading that book, I like learned a shit ton, and I kind of started putting pieces together in terms of how Steve, in my opinion, was able to use his insights into meditation, his experiences in India, and some of his direct quotes kind of give me hints to where he got his reality distortion field from, and like how it was really rooted in these Eastern traditions, right? And like after I learned that, I went deeper down the spiritual rabbit hole, and I started applying the techniques that I was learning in terms of like just bending reality to your will. And like it's funny because around that time, like my businesses really started to take off, and I was like, holy fuck, like this is unbelievable. And like I was kind of like, I guess what you can say, like applying spiritual materialism or whatever the fuck they say. And like I was just using spirituality as a way to make money, to be real. And like doing that for a bunch of years, I was like, holy fuck, like there's really something to this thing, right? And then I would like just keep meditating. I was still doing my 20 minutes a day. But then I started reading like more spiritual books that weren't really related to like bending reality or whatever. They had more to do with just like the state of who you actually are, like how you're the consciousness behind the character. You're not really the character. You're not really your body. You're not really your mind. You're not really your thoughts, all that jazz. And then obviously, like at this time, I was reading these books. I was like, yo, this guy's just on a bunch of drugs. Like, what the fuck does he mean? I'm not my body, right? Like, I can see my body. This is me. Like, what do you mean? And like, I didn't none of that shit. But like, based on the experiences that I was having, I was like, fuck, man, maybe there's something to it. And like, obviously, like these people weren't like no dummies that were writing these books. There's this like ancient knowledge, right? Like passed down for like centuries and centuries. So I was like, yo, there has to be something to this. And then I just went deeper down the rabbit hole, started meditating more, started doing a lot more inner work. At this time, I also took mushrooms, and like that kind of brought those contents of those books to life. And I was like, whoa, like, you know, there's really something to this. But like, obviously after the mushrooms wore off, it was back to normal life. But what happened with me was I started doing like a lot more deeper meditations. And I remember like one meditation in particular where everything kind of changed for me. It was like a 45-minute meditation session. It was like a very normal session, just a typical session, just how I did every single day. And like through that meditation, like some weird shit started happening where like a bunch of black boulders started like falling. I had my eyes closed, and like blue light started emerging out of nowhere, like white light surrounding my entire body. Like it sounds fucking like bullshit, but like that sort of stuff happened. And like after that experience, like before I would have to be like consciously aware of the fact that I needed to be mindful and like aware, and it would be so easy for me to get sucked up in the day-to-day life of my character. But like after having that experience, like I've just been locked into like present moment awareness. And I remember a week following that experience, my eyes kept hurting. And I remember journaling about this. I was like, yo, why the fuck did my eyes keep hurting? They keep hurting and hurting and hurting. Like, it was so bizarre. And then I remember I was watching a spiritual video on YouTube. It was like one of those Ted McKenna videos, and he was analyzing The Matrix. And then he's like, yo, like, if you guys notice in the movie The Matrix, when Neo left the Matrix, he was like to Morpheus, yo, my eyes keep hurting. And Morpheus is like, yeah, because you're using them for the first time, right? You escaped the Matrix. And then I was like, because I had those journal entries leading up to that point, I was like, holy fuck. I remember I was like lying on the couch watching that video and like sat up. I was like, holy shit, maybe that's why, right? Obviously, like, you know, like, I don't know if that's true or not. But yeah, it legit felt like waking up from the video game of life and going from being the character inside the video game to identifying yourself as the person who's holding the remote control. And that being that's holding the remote control is independent from time and space, and nothing can really harm him or her, right? It's just a being. It's not even a him or her, which was amazing. And just to be able to rest in that level of presence, no matter what happens in day-to-day life, is amazing. Like, even when I did mushrooms, I experienced like ego death, which was a fucking trip in itself, in the sense that I was watching my character die, and like, but the being and the presence that I was like completely unharmed. It was like watching a movie, and inside the movie, you're seeing your favorite character die, and obviously you're sad, like you can feel the full emotions that come with that. But as a spectator, as somebody who's watching the movie, you're not the one that's actually being killed. It's just a character on the screen. Like, I actually went through that entire death experience, and that completely allowed me to lose my fear of death, because I was like, yo, like, it's basically an illusion. Like, it's not even real. And allowed me to identify like with my quote unquote real me. And like, since then, it's just, life's just been a fucking magical trip, a magical ride. And like, business, productivity, health, all those areas have just started to come together at a level that was like unimaginable to me before. And life's just been like a joyful trip ever since.
Holy smokes. I mean, you just gave everyone listening so much to chew on. And it's pretty incredible, because I'm trying to put myself in the perspective of someone who has never meditated before. Like, let's say 12 months ago, looking at myself 12 months ago, I would have said, what is wrong with this guy? Like, what? I don't understand half of what he just said. So there's that person. And then there's also the person of like, maybe who's someone who's meditated before, like me at my current stage. I know exactly what you're talking about, but that even seems like craziness to me. So yeah. How do you, my question is, how do you live in the world that we are currently residing in while also maintaining that bliss and that happiness?
Yeah, that's a good question. First of all, like, I just want to like say, like, I've been on the other end of like conversations like this where like somebody's saying like shit like this that sounds fucking crazy. And I've been the person listening and being like, yo, this motherfucker lost his mind. Like, put this guy in a fucking psych ward. You know, like, I've been that person, right? Yeah. I've been that person where like doubted all this shit. I was like, yo, this is straight bullshit. Like, these guys are like off their rocker. Right. But like, I had to go through those experiences on my own. They say the best teacher is experience. Right. So like, it's easy to read about this in the books. But like, even for me, like, I read about this for years and I was like, yeah, that might be true. That might be false, whatever. It allows me to live a better life. So let's just believe in it. But until I experience pieces of it, and I'm not even there yet, there's like some people that are like, most people are like fucking on levels I can't even imagine. The stuff they're talking about sounds so crazy to me. And I'm like, whoa. Right. But like, direct experience is crucial. And I think I know anybody can experience what I just said. It's just a matter of following the right steps and just exercising discipline. And you too can escape the matrix.
So what is the first step for someone who has no idea what you're talking about, but is like, this is kind of interesting. What's the first step that you would recommend?
Yeah. Oh, yeah. I didn't mean to cut you off on the last question, so I can answer that after. But with the first step, a really good book that I recommend is Mind Illuminated. It has 10 levels, right? So it'll take you from being a novice, somebody that's just completely unfamiliar with any of this, and it'll work your way up throughout the 10 levels. And it may take like a few years, it may take 3 years, it may take 4 years, whatever. But the map is inside that book. And like, that's the book that I recommend because it will literally take you from where you're starting and it will help you wake up to the video game of life and basically start living life like a lucid dream.
Wow. Okay. Mind illuminated. Time to check that one out. I haven't heard of that one yet.
Yeah, I would recommend that one for sure. I think because like a lot of the meditation books, they're great, but I feel like it's like one of those things where like everybody is telling you like one thing and another person is telling you another. It's kind of hard to put all the pieces together, but I feel like that book really does a great job of putting all the pieces together. And more so, it makes spirituality and like meditation practical, right? Like a lot of people just, like even for myself, like I was just meditating like on and off since 2011, just on my own, like, following no map, following nothing. And like, yeah, I had like a lot of creative gains, a lot of the business success, a lot of the ideas that led to business success can be traced back to those meditation sessions. But like, it was cool. Like I was just enjoying benefits of the character. Like I never had any crazy experiences. Like at most, the only crazy experience I had was like just seeing like purple lights, right? That was like just the only experience. But when I started like following Mind Illuminated and like actual maps, that's when like you can actually see where you are on the journey and like move forward, right? Especially for me, it really helps because I'm more like goal oriented. So like having a map to follow gave me some direction and really made a lot of difference.
It's so interesting that you talk about that because something that someone said to me pretty recently was like, so I sit in the car and I watch myself think, is that meditation? And I said to him, absolutely. If you're watching yourself think and you're sitting down and just watching your thoughts, that is absolutely meditation. However, if you want to see the most progress with whatever you're doing, it helps to follow a plan. And I think we get so caught up in that it's so hard for us to realize that because we want to just do things like we want to go on a run. And if we go on a run whenever we feel like it, are we going to be in better shape than if we have a plan and a schedule? And so I think what that book you're talking about does is probably gives you a plan or gives you some sort of understanding of where you are. And that's really cool and is really the way to unlock gains for anything, I believe.
100%. 100%. Couldn't agree more. I think that nails it, right? Like even like myself, like before I would just do like a lot of walking meditation and I was like still like, like type A minded, like, yo, I can knock out a walk in the meditation session at the same time, right? I think that thought alone fucking overrides the benefits of meditation. Like, it's all the fucking benefits. It's the fact that I was thinking like that. But yeah, like if you set that routine and like you make it a part of your daily routine and you like have that map to follow, whether it's meditation, whether it's in business, whether it's with health, whatever, it makes a huge difference.
And also another thing that I want to mention is that coming at it with set expectations, coming at anything with set expectations is sometimes going to hinder your progress. Mm-hmm. What I mean by that is like when you go and meditate and you're going and meditating and let's say you're like, oh shit, I heard that Tej did X on this podcast and I'm going to get this, but if I do, meditation for X amount of years or months or whatever, you're losing the sense of the meditation. You're losing exactly. It's like the same thing if you go to the gym and you look at, you look at yourself after every time you go to the gym and you're like, why am I not seeing progress? Why am I not seeing progress? It's like, if you have no expectations and you just do the action, that's often going to get you further than if you just think about, oh, I want X or I want Y. Like, just follow the plan, follow the internal action, and the external will come later.
100%. And I also think that makes life and the process so much more funner and more enjoyable, right? Because if you have expectations, it like takes you out of the present moment where all the learning, where all the joy, where all the creation happens, and you're so fixated on this external expectation that may or may not happen. And like, it like leads to a lot of suffering as well. So like, I'm with you, bro. Like, with anything, I try to like limit those expectations because like those expectations also like end up making that activity seem more important than it maybe is. And like that sometimes results in a lot of resistance that actually keeps you from succeeding.
Awesome. So how do you balance the you don't want to have expectations, but at the same time, you do want to have goals, right? Because you do want to go to a certain place. You want to elevate yourself. How do you balance those two, in your opinion?
Yeah, so personally, I'm not too big on goals. Like I've set goals in the past and like achieved some, didn't achieve most, but goals never really worked for me. What ended up driving a lot of the success for me was intentions, right? So like the way I think of a goal is something that you lack that you want to achieve in the future, right? Whereas it's kind of like what you were saying, like an expectation. An intention, on the other hand, for me, is more so a way of being in the present moment now, right? So like an intention would be a goal with all doubt removed. And it's like you living the goal as if it's already real, right? So once you get to that place, then you can just enjoy the process and just be present and kind of surrender to the flow of life. So like for me, I don't set goals. All I do is set an intention about my ideal way of being. And then from there, I surrender to the process and let go of all expectations. I know what I want is already done. Life just hasn't caught up yet. And life is just going to give me opportunities to allow me to experience that intention. So all I have to do is surrender to the flow of life. I think once you set the intention, life presents you with opportunities to seize that intention. But the problem with most people is they're so fixated on their expectations or goals, or they're just a pussy and they don't go with the flow of life. They'll resist the flow. I can say that because I was the biggest pussy of all time, like the biggest, right?
Yeah.
So like, that's the way I approach it. And like, that's been the biggest difference for me. And it also results in so much joy and like expansion and like presence in like daily life. Like just setting that intention and aligning your habits, behaviors, thoughts, ways of being with that intention and just living that now, because time is an illusion. Like, I don't know if you want to go there, but time is a fucking illusion, right? Like goals just reaffirm your sense of lack and you're always chasing. And even if you achieve a goal in the interim, you're going to be miserable because you're reaffirming your lack of a goal, whereas intentions give you your superhero powers.
Wow. Okay. I feel absolutely schooled on that one, and I'm happy you took me to school there. That's very interesting. Can you give us an example of like when you set an intention and it came true? You know, that process that you just described. I'd love to hear the way, an example of how that happened for you in your life.
For sure. So like, yeah, there's like a shit ton of examples. I'll like pull the one that kind of probably the listeners will get the most value from in like the business sense, right? So like when I first got into business, I was like most people, right? I was like, especially like I went to business school too, and they really like push on you the importance of like, you know, like setting up business plans, setting up your monthly targets, your quarterly targets, your yearly targets, all that stuff. And I applied all that stuff, but like that just made me anxious, man. I was like, you know, like this is the year, these are my targets. And every day that I never hit that target because it was a yearly target just made me feel miserable and anxious. And I was always thinking like, yo, am I going to hit this target? Am I not going to hit this target? And like I was just stuck in my head 24/7. And that really robbed me from just the joy of life. I felt like I was just a robot looking back on it now. But at the time, obviously, I didn't know any better. I thought this is just the way it works. You just have to like set your targets and just like grind and hustle and like kind of make yourself miserable in the pursuit of that target. But like when I started discovering this way of like setting intentions and just like letting those intentions guide you, right, it really made a huge difference in business for me. So I remember when I had like my first business break, what I would do is I would write out my intentions every single, and I still do this to this day. It's just like the intentions have changed, but I would write down like, I, Tej Dosa, make $50,000 a day, like over and over again, like 15 times a day, right? I first learned this technique in university, and I used it to go from being like a shit student, getting like C's and B's, to like graduating with a 3.87 GPA, right? Which was like, to my parents, they're like, what the fuck? Like, did you like fucking scam the teachers, right? They're like, what the fuck? This makes no sense. Who are you, right? And then I started applying it in business. And I remember I would write that like over and over again. I Tej Dosa, make $50,000 a day. Boom, 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 boom. Every day like clockwork before I turned on my laptop. And then what's funny is like, once I set that intention, it wasn't like I was stressed. I wasn't anxious. It was already done. It's in my present reality, right? After I wrote that, it's not like, yo, I'm stressed now. I'm anxious. Like, I got to make this happen. It's like, no, it's already done. Time just hasn't caught up yet, right? So like after writing that, I would just be like, okay, it wasn't even conscious. It was just like, I'm naturally just going to take the actions that align with that way of being. If I'm a person who's making 50K per day, what are the actions I'm taking? What skills do I know? And all that stuff just naturally started coming together. It wasn't even me making the conscious decision. It was life being like, yo, you want to make 50K a day? Then I would see like some blogger talking about copywriting. I would see some marketer talking about like Facebook ads and how he's been able to generate so much money with that. And I was like, whoa, this is life giving me the signs. So I guess I'll learn copy. I guess I'll learn media buying. I guess I'll learn funnel building. I guess I'll cold email this CEO because he just randomly came. Like I just had my eyes open to opportunities that aligned with that intention. And like, majority of the time I had the balls to seize those opportunities, but half the time, in all honesty, I pussied out. But the fact that the times that I did seize those opportunities, it led to crazy stories, crazy adventures, and then ultimately I started making $50,000 a day.
Incredible. So I know there are going to be people listening who, when you just said time is an illusion, and I know there's going to be people listening who want me to go back to that, I'm going to assume. So can you talk about that? What do you mean by time is an illusion? Can you expand on that?
Yeah. So like when I think about time as an illusion, so like I've studied like quantum physics, obviously not like a geek or, just like read my fucking I don't want to seem like I got my like PhD in this shit, right? But like, like I just like read a few books, but like studied like quantum physics, studied a bunch of like spirituality, obviously, and like even like Einstein, right? He talks a lot about this, and there's a lot of cool videos. But basically, like my understanding and experience of time being illusion is like the real whacked out answer is the present, the past, and future is all occurring simultaneously. Right? There really is no past. There really is no future. For me, like from my experiences, what life feels like and what I've experienced it as is like, imagine a reel of film, right? Which kind of documents the entire movie on the screen. When you're watching a movie, the scenes happen frame by frame. But like as you're watching the movie, the scenes towards the end of the movie are already created and they're already done, but you just experience life and that movie frame by frame. But like the past of the movie was already created, the future of the movie was already created, and it's already done, right? So like there is no past, there is no future. All there is the now, and like the past and the future are occurring simultaneously, right? So after hearing that, like an average person, or even myself, I'm an average person too, would be like, yo, does that mean like everything's already created, everything's already set in stone? And I feel like no. Like from my experience, I would say no. In my experience, what happens is we don't really create anything in life. A bunch of quantum possibilities exist, right? So imagine life being a real movie that has an infinite number of endings, an infinite number of events that can take place, right? And it's already all created. All those events are already existed. They're already created. They're already happening. But what event you experience depends on your thoughts, words, and actions in the present moment. So like those are your tools, and you use those tools to call forward whatever quantum possibility you want to experience, right? So like there is no time in the sense that like, hey, like a year from now, I want to be here. That year from now is going to be in the same moment of now that which you already are in, right? So there is no future. There is no past. All you can do is just live in the now and align your actions today to call forward whatever reality you want to experience. And that's what I've been doing. I've been doing that a lot in business, but now I started doing it in other areas of life. And it fucking works. Like I think the book Reality Transurfing talks about this in greater detail, much better job than I just did. But yeah, like that's the way I experience it. And that's like the way life works for me. And I could be wrong. I'm probably wrong. Let me just say that. Like I don't know all the answers. I'm like Sway. I ain't got the fucking answers, but like that's my take.
Well, it's certainly an interesting take, and it resonates after, spending time in meditation and spending time just listening to my thoughts, it resonates, but it's a whole nother level that I am personally not, like I'm not there yet, but I, it's worked for you thus far, obviously. So that's incredible. Speaking of the past or present and future, one question I had here for you was, if you could go to dinner with any person, past, present, or I guess future, who would that be? Who would that person be if you could go to dinner with anybody?
Oh, that's a really good question.
And why?
Let's see. I want to think about this one. I remember when I was younger, like in my teens, if you had asked me that question then, the person that I would have picked would have been Richard Branson, right? Because I feel like, at that stage in my life, even now, like I really relate to the way he's lived his life and all that he's created, while also maintaining that sense of inner child. Like he kept his inner child alive, like his daily routines, his daily habits, like the stuff that he does, and how he's like in his 60s, or like I don't know if he's in his 70s now, but like how fun loving he is, like how he's always laughing. And like obviously that may be just be his public persona, like all the stuff's coming out about Ellen, so who knows what people really are. But, I had to throw that dig at Ellen. But Richard Branson, like that, I remember reading his biography, Losing My Virginity, and that had a huge impact on me when I was a kid. So like even like when I remember like creating my goals, like meeting Richard Branson and like having dinner with him was like one of my goals, right? So like back then I would pick somebody like that. But like now, I think who I would actually pick would be somebody like Ram Dass, right? Because I feel like it would just be like so cool to just like be in his presence. Like I know, like I watched a bunch of interviews with Mike Posner, and he's like, "Yo, I met Ram Dass, and like it completely changed my life. Like in the sense that like it sent him down like all the spirituality, this entire rabbit hole, and like he's been doing amazing things." Right. Obviously, like that may not all be due to Ram Dass. Obviously, like Mike Posner is a G in his own right. But I think somebody like that would be really cool because it will give me greater insight into the beautiful thing that this thing called life is.
Yeah, man. And it's so funny that you say Ram Dass, because the story with Mike Posner is that Mike Posner apparently went to Ram Dass, and then after they had a conversation, after they talked, he said for the rest of the day, he felt differently. He felt as if he had a glow and energy about him where things changed. And he thought that night to himself, oh, shit, is my life going to be different from now on? And then he said he woke up and the glow faded away. But, I mean, what an incredible thing that if you could interact with someone and they could be better off for it, it's something that I think of often. And it's a good heuristic or mental model to use. It's like, if I can leave people better than they were before I was in their presence, then you're doing something right. And yeah, Ram Dass is the man. Simple as that.
What's really interesting is like, I read like, I think Ram Dass's book, and like, he originally experienced that like from his guru that he trained under in India, and like that was the effect that he had on him, and like that made him drop everything and like want to investigate further. So it's really cool how like he impacted Mike Posner in the same way. And what's also really interesting is like going back to 75 Hard, just from doing that program with you, that was actually one of the coolest transformations I saw in you, right? Like even before, like I told you, like you were super high energy, super loving, super caring, right? But it was more so like you were still trying to figure out your own stuff. But I feel like after that program and what transpired later, like, dude, like even like reading your tweets, right? It's like they have some life in them. Like it's really rare to see somebody on Twitter where you can actually feel the words and not just read the words. From your profile picture to the blog post to this podcast to the way you've been going about everything, it gives me the same feeling that I think like Mike Posner got from Ram Dass. So it's really cool to see that in you as well. Like you're inspiring as fuck to me in that sense for sure.
Thank you, man. That truly means a lot. I think that I truly believe in my heart of hearts that everyone has this power and everyone is capable. All you need to do, all I've been doing is living up to the highest version of myself and just setting that as the intention, like you were saying before, and letting the rest fall where it is. My intention is to live up to the highest version of myself. And that has allowed life to open up for me in an incredible way. And I think that if other people set the intention in the same way, or set an intention to love, to become the greatest version of themselves, they could also have that same impact. I truly believe that.
100%. It's so funny, like when I would first like read about like, you know, like love, I would be like, yo, what is this pussy ass shit, right? It sounds so like sissy. But like, yo, like now, like love is like the most masculine thing in the world, man. It's like the ultimate strength. To love everybody regardless of what happens, how can you not get any more masculine than that?
Yeah, and it's crazy because I saw someone say on Twitter, like, to be a man is to be 90% beast and 10% love. And I thought that was interesting because that's probably what I would have said a year ago. But today I believe that to be a beast it's 100% love, and the ability to be a beast comes from that love. And love is so real. And love is so real. Like I love you, bro. Like I actually have so much love for you. And if I think about what's up?
I said likewise, bro. Right back at you.
Let's go. And if I think about the love that I have for you, bro, and I think about the love that I have for my mom and my brother, and I think about how can I give this love to everyone? How can I genuinely love everybody? Dude, when you start thinking that way and you start acting for other people's best intentions, it gives you the freedom, the genuine freedom to say whatever the hell you want to say, to do whatever you want to do, because you know at the end of the day, you love that person. You want the best for them. So if you do slip up here or there, like I will slip up 100 times on the mic, you spit enough times on the mic, you're going to mess up a few times. But if you do slip up, you're going to be okay with that because you love that person. I love you. Whoever's listening right now, I actually love you and adore you. And so the point is that if I know that to be true, if I genuinely believe I love you, it gives me the freedom, and it would give you the freedom to do whatever the hell you wanted because you know you have the other person's best intention at heart. Exactly.
And like even like from the practical standpoint, right? Like, you know, so many people, they want to be like unstoppable, right? Like especially like the masculine, like those ideas really tailor to the state of mind where I just want to be fucking unstoppable. Nothing can stop me. To actually get there, you need 100% love, because that's the only way you become unstoppable. Otherwise, whatever roadblock comes in your way, you're going to stop. But if you can love the roadblocks, then guess what? The roadblock isn't a roadblock anymore.
Brother, it's amazing. And when I was depressed, man, I read this book, Love Yourself Like Your Life Depends on It. And I'm sitting here early March and I'm reading this book and I'm just thinking to myself, okay, this guy just says, like, this guy was in a similar situation, Kamal Ravikant, who's a killer, a beast, a hell of a man. He basically is in this situation much worse than mine, where one of his friends died, his business collapses, and all he does is he says, I love myself. And he did this over and over, and eventually his life changed. So here I was, early March, depressed, just thinking to myself, oh, like, it worked for this guy, so who am I? And let me just do it. Let me just try it out. So just saying you love yourself over and over and over again, and then actually seeing the change occur in real life, it's just an incredible thing. And that goes back to the power of the mind, where we were talking about before, is like, if your mind believes that, if you truly believe that I love myself, that gets reflected in the external world.
100%. I really love that book too. I remember when I read it, one quote or like one question inside the book that he encouraged readers to ask really stood out to me. And it really helped me like get rid of a lot of bad habits and just like live a more epic life. And the question was, I might butcher it, but from what I remember, it was like, if I loved myself truly and deeply, would I allow myself to experience this? Right? So like so many times. So
powerful.
Yeah, exactly, bro. Like so many times when I was just like, would be like putting myself through bullshit with like bad habits, like I would use that question as a crutch, and I was like, yo, like if I actually truly loved myself, truly and deeply, unconditionally, like I wouldn't be eating the shit food right now. I wouldn't be like fucking, you know, like slamming drinks like no tomorrow. I wouldn't be like, you know, neglecting my health. I wouldn't be sitting on the laptop for like 6 hours straight. Like I would be going out for a walk. And like that question alone, especially when you use it like throughout the day, it really allows you to align your behaviors to be in sync with the highest version of yourself. And it happens naturally, right? Like so many times you want to get rid of bad habits and there's so much force, there's so much willpower you got to draw upon. Like once you got love in your heart and you use that as a guiding force, everything else takes care of itself.
It's amazing. And how, like, when did you read that book? Did you just come, like, it's so crazy to me, bro, how the paths, like, have aligned with me and you in particular. And that's why you're my first guest on this podcast, because you have influenced my life so greatly. And this is a man, everybody listening, this is a man who I've never met in my life, but I've read his mind on Twitter. I've read his journal on Twitter, and he's influenced me by his actions, by what he's done for me. And bro, when did you read this book? And like, how, it's crazy that we've read all the same stuff without realizing it.
Dude, yeah, man. Like your story and my story, like there's so many parallels. Like even when I was talking about earlier, I think like before this podcast about the recent thread you dropped about your story, I was like, yo, holy fuck. Like, yo, this guy was doing exactly the same shit that I was doing and facing like the same highs and lows and had those internal battles as well. So it's like remarkable. But when I read that book I actually discovered it through James Altucher. I think he featured it on his blog. And like, I used to follow James at the time before he went all crypto crazy. And like, I discovered it through that. So when it was first released, whenever that year was, I think I was in university at the time.
Word. Yeah, I mean, it's pretty incredible because I think James and him are friends, and you know, it's really cool to see their friendship. Bro, I had one last question before we wrap this thing up. Sure. Which is, what's an absurd thing that you love to do?
That's a good question. These are some good questions, bro. This doesn't seem...
Half are stolen from Tim Ferriss.
Yeah, I was like, this doesn't seem like your first podcast, bro. You're a vet. You're a vet at the game. But let's see. I don't know if this is like absurd, but like I have like a lot of like weird habits that I do like on a daily basis, right? And like one of those is like when I get up in the morning, like I imagine like golden light coming from the sky and like covering my entire body, and that light is full of the highest degree of positivity and love and joy, and like it captures my entire body. And whenever I'm going through my day-to-day life and like say I read a headline that's like negative, or like I come across people that are like a little bit toxic and they're like complaining, whatever they're saying, their words, I imagine their words coming, trying to enter my state of mind, but the light like basically protects me from their words, and it just sends their words like bouncing in 100 different directions, right? So like that alone has helped me in so many situations in terms of keeping my state of mind in the way that I want it without letting other external sources get into my state of mind. And I think that's the most important thing to protect. I think your mind is like a garden, right? What you plant inside your mind is ultimately what you experience in life. So like so many times, most of us have unguarded minds where we don't have like an invisible shield around our mind that protects us. So basically what that allows is other people to come and like plant things in your garden that are going to grow into destructive things, right? Like destructive health, bad businesses, bad decisions, toxic relationships with yourself. So you got to protect yourself with that. And that's like that's the way that I do it. And it allows me to actually take conscious control of what I plant in my garden. Of course, I'm not perfect. Sometimes like my character has insecurities, right? Like so many times, like some things will get through and they'll get planted in my garden, but like I'm conscious of the fact that it got planted. But just generally speaking, I feel like if you can protect yourself and take conscious control of your mental garden, and figure out what goes in and what comes out, I feel like you can live an epic life, even if you just control it like 51% of the time.
Wow. Fucking amazing, bro. Fucking amazing. Please tell everyone where they could find you, where they would get some more Tej Dosa in their life.
Yeah, for sure. I think the main resource would probably be Twitter. My handle is Comedic Bizman, And yeah, I think just test out those tweets. If they resonate, then you can subscribe to the email list where I publish slightly longer content. But if the tweets don't mesh with your reality, then obviously don't subscribe, because there's just going to be more of that kind of stuff.
Awesome, man. Well, it's been a pleasure talking to you. I'm so grateful you took the time, and thank you for being my first guest and allowing me to struggle a little bit through this podcast. And dude, I'm so grateful for you, truly. I really appreciate it, man.
Yeah, dude, this was amazing. I feel like, I've been like, no knock on like other podcasts, but like this podcast is probably based on a relationship as well. But it feels like we're just like two buddies hopping on the phone and just having a conversation. And honestly, those are like the podcasts I love the most, right? Like you can just talk about random shit and like whatever the person says, like we just go on a tangent. And I feel like that's what actually delivers the most value instead of it being so scripted.
Yeah. I mean, what I'm trying to do here is I'm trying to, make it scripted a little bit, but I also want to give us that time to go on those crazy places, because the things that you say are always going to bring to different avenues and different situations and things that we couldn't have even thought of before. So yeah, I'm just trying to live in the moment, man. That's what we're trying to do. And hopefully I can create that too and build on this episode into the future.
Respect, bro. Like one of these podcasts, if you're down, I actually want to interview you.
Bro, I mean, yeah, of course, bro.
Whenever you're ready, like you probably want to get like some more podcasts under your belt, but like I want to switch the tables, because like, bro, your story is fascinating as fuck too. And like your transformation is like all time inspiring. So I want to dive deeper into the story as well.
For sure. That'll be something that we'll discuss on future episodes.
Awesome, bro. It was a pleasure, man. Thanks for having me.
That was my interview with the man, the myth, and the legend Tej Dosa. If you'd like more from me, you can check out my website, DannyMiranda.com. You can let me know what you thought by sending me an email, Danny@DannyMiranda.com, or you can let me know on Twitter @HeyDannyMiranda. Overall, it's been a pleasure, and I'll see you guys in the next one.